This is a quick point on a book that Simon and Sister will be coming out that I'm writing in Q1 of 2012 called Abundance. So we're living on a world which has 7 billion growing to 9 billion individuals. And I posit to you that these next 20 to 30 years are a period of magical time where we are going to create a world of absolute abundance. How many folks hear about water wars and the world is going to hell? How many folks actually think that the world is worse off now than it was 10 years ago? Raise your hand. How many folks think that the world is a better place today than it was 10 years ago? Well, that's good. The majority of people think we're in a worse off situation. You have to realize that the human brain, again, going back to the function, physical structure of the brain, we have this thing called the amygdala, which evolved as the danger sensor. So when something comes into your eyes and your ears, it automatically gets split into two parts. It goes to your cortex, where you process the information, and goes to your amygdala, which is looking for any kind of danger. And so we have a desire to see danger. You put up a beautiful woman and a fire, and you'll struggle for a microsecond, but you'll be looking at the fire. Because, and it's sick, I know, but the fact of the matter is, we have learned to filter for danger first. Because it was an evolutionary trait that kept us alive. When you see a rustle in the bush, 99% of the time it's wind, 1% it might be a tiger, but your brain automatically thinks tiger. Because that concern would keep you alive. So ultimately, the news is 95 or 99% bad news because that's what gets our attraction. That's what gets our attention. So I believe that we're living into a world of abundance. And if you look at the world 100 years ago compared to today, to go from Boston to Chicago took a month's wage. Now it's a half-day wage. A 3-minute phone call was 19 hours. It's free now if you're on Vonage. Electricity, lighting, all of these things have gotten cheaper and cheaper. If you look at poverty in the United States, which I think is below the $22,000 for a family of 4, 99% of the people under the poverty level have electricity, water, flushing toilets. 95% have a television. I love this. 70% have a car and air conditioning. For God's sakes, the richest people in the world 100 years ago didn't have this stuff. And now, if you're impoverished, you have these things. You're living the life of a king. But yet we call this poverty. It's not poverty. Maybe it's a little bit of hardship. It's not poverty. But there are parts of the world that have poverty. We'll talk about that. This is a table setting from the days of Napoleon. And there's this great story that Napoleon gathered the kings and queens from around the world for this succulent dinner in the 1840s. And for his local noblemen, he put silver plates out. And for the senior noblemen, he put gold plates out. But for the kings and queens from around the world, he put out aluminum plates. Aluminum, back in the 1840s and 50s, was the most valuable metal on the planet. How many folks knew that? It's the third most abundant element on Earth, but it's bound in something called bauxite. And it was so hard to remove the aluminum, the pure metal aluminum from bauxite, that only small amounts existed. It was so precious and so rare. Something so abundant as aluminum atoms were rare in their pure form. And then we created some forms of electrolysis that use technology to extract aluminum, so we make aluminum cans, aluminum foil. And you throw it away not thinking about it now, because technology took something which was truly abundant and made it functionally abundant. So do you have that concept of technology and how that does that? Now let's look at abundance. And I define the terms that I think of as abundance. Abundance in communication, in energy, in water, in food, in resources, education, healthcare. I mentioned earlier cell phone penetration in Africa. Do you know that someone in Africa on a cell phone today has better telecom capability than the President of the United States did 20 years ago? Think about it. They do. They are living in a world of communication abundance. If they're on Google, they've got more knowledge at their fingertips than the President of the United States did 15 years ago. Incredible. Energy. We have lots of energy, tons of energy. Do you know that on the Earth's surface, More solar energy lands here in 1 hour than the human race consumes an entire year. Put a different way, we have 6,000 times more energy that hits the Earth in solar on the surface of the Earth than the human race uses. Energy is abundant, it's just not converted to usable form. Just like aluminum was abundant, right, and not converted to usable form yet. But what's going on that's interesting is that solar production is growing at 30% a year. We're at 1% now, but exponential doublings, in 18 years, we can meet 100% of our needs with solar. What's interesting, a couple years later, we've got twice as much energy. A couple years later after that, we've got 4 times and 8 times and 16 times as much energy. What do we do on this planet with 16 times more energy than we consume? One thing is provide abundant, free, clean drinking water to the world. We hear about water wars. Oh my God, we're going to be fighting over water. My God, when Carl Sagan looked back at the Earth, it was a pale blue dot. We are living on a water planet. We have lots of water on Earth. The problem is that 97.3% is salt water, bound with salt, just like aluminum was bound with bauxite. Lots of energy, desalination is easy. All the water you want for all the functions you want. We live in this myopic view of these scarce resources, but we are living in a world of abundant resources. Food and nutrition, we're going to go from evolution by natural selection to evolution by intelligent direction, where we can create foods that are far more nutritious, far quicker growing. I'll just mention in this slide, going back to sort of the thinking we do at Singularity University and looking at the upside, the bright side of these technologies, is that in the 90s, computers and mobile phones created the billion-dollar companies. The internet and social media, e-commerce. This next decade is a decade for biotech and ubiquitous networks, and then AI and robotics and 3D printing and nanotechnology. And those technologies are the technology that will give us a world of absolute abundance. We're the biggest markets on the planet. The markets that will create billion-dollar industries, $100 billion, trillion-dollar industries, are the markets that will help give us all a world of abundance, not a life of luxury, but a life of opportunity.